Now, I know that you guys are also developing several engines for the Orion and the SLS. Once the acquisition of Pratt & Whitney goes through, you guys will be manufacturing all of the engines for the SLS with the exception of the solid rocket boosters, unless you guys are selected for the advanced boosters from there. Can you tell me a little bit about the development of all those separate engines, from the refurbished shuttle main engines to the upper stage and the Orion propulsion system as well?
Yeah, as you said, we're supporting Orion, the Jettison escape system, and we're also supporting a better, which is the NASA Better program for the SLS boosters. There's some synergy between that and another program we have, which is called Hydrocarbon Boost, that's funded by the Air Force, where we're developing the next generation hydrocarbon engine. That's been going on for a while. I can't say too much about the plans following the acquisition of Rocketdyne, because the companies have not yet been put together, so there's still some issues in terms of how we proceed. But as you said, the path forward is actually very interesting, because not only are we producing the majority of rocket engines on certain vehicles, we're actually stepping into a direction now where we're going into becoming not just a provider of propulsion, but a provider of systems. And that includes entire vehicles. So you'll see Aerojet grow and become more of a system-like company. A lot of people don't know this. Aerojet actually builds avionics. We build avionics hardware and software, and we integrate them into our systems. And we have another program called LEONIDAS, which is a small launch vehicle program where the whole vehicle is being built by Aerojet now in partnership with Sandia National Labs. And you'll see as the company evolves and becomes more modernized and moves into the future, that there's a transition from becoming just an engine provider to becoming a systems provider.
Wow. With the LEONIDAS vehicle, would that be like a small satellite launcher, medium, heavy class, or a whole family?
It's based on a family of solid rocket motors, which we call the LEONIDAS rocket motors. It's currently, I can't tell the exact specs for it, but it is rail-launched. It's a rail-launched small payload vehicle for orbital delivery, and it will be probably the largest rail-launched vehicle ever built. And we're looking at first flight in the next couple of years.
Wow. Well, with all these different projects that you're managing and working on, what sort of experiences or difficulties do you foresee that might cause any sort of delays in delivering any of these systems?
It's actually an interesting question. There was a talk yesterday at the Space Access Conference, which was really interesting in that regard, where one of the speakers mentioned, I forgot the name right now, but he said that the generation has changed from the children of Apollo to the more current generation. And there's a distinct difference in the way we see our motivations and how we approach space as a field of doing work. And I was born in the time of the first moon landings, kind of aging myself here. But I'm kind of on the cusp between the traditional children of Apollo era and the new internet people generation, if that's what you want to call it. And I think the biggest distinction between the two, which the speaker made yesterday, which was very much to the point, is that the new generation has a very short attention span. If we go to build a new program or a new rocket or a new capability and it's going to take 20 years to make it become real, nobody cares. We don't care anymore about things that take 20, 25, 30 years to develop. We want to see things today. And this kind of short attention span is starting to worm its way into the expectations of getting things done for both the traditional and the new companies, but also in the way of we doing business. So as you see us going forward, I think you'll find a much stronger emphasis on getting things to operational time faster, because nobody has the time to sit around for another 5 to 10 years and just do science projects and see where they want to take us.
What sort of ways then do you foresee that you would be able to accelerate programs, and would that have a lot to do with the FAA guidelines as opposed to NASA's guidelines for flight safety and all sort of other factors?
I think the biggest advantage or the biggest key driver in terms of accelerating programs is build a little, test a little, fly a little, just stepwise approach and building blocks of making small steps forward that you can chew off and bite off fairly quickly, and then proceed to learn something. You can't learn unless you're on the starting line. You actually have to fly, test, and learn something from your mistakes and then move forward. So that's the biggest difference, I think, that you'll see going forward. There's also a shift in the contractual mechanisms that you'll see in the industry right now. Aerojet has been for a long time predominantly a government contractor, and the old way of doing business was cost-plus contracts. But with the success of the commercial partnership between the commercial space and NASA government space, you see that fixed price contracts are becoming the norm, which has been the norm for a long time in the small entrepreneurial space, but it's now also taken place in the larger, more established industry participants. And with that shift to fixed price contracting, that's a whole new way of doing things. And I think Aerojet is in a unique position because it's what I like to say, the small one of the big guys. They're very large, so they have a lot of capability to bring to bear, which is great. But they're still small enough to be agile and change. And with this change taking place, you'll see this kind of rejuvenation of how we're doing business and how we're going forward, and taking this more aggressive, newer model of doing things faster, quicker, and more affordable into the future.
Wow. Well then, what sort of expectations or even surprises could people within the industry and even outside the industry be able to expect?
Well, as I said, Aerojet's been in this business for 70 years. It's a long time, and they are everywhere, really. Every time you hear space mentioned, there's probably a good chance Aerojet is participating in a project. And the big shift is that we are becoming more of a prime contractor rather than a supplying contractor. You'll see the shift towards integrated systems, including avionics, including guidance mechanisms, and so forth, where we, instead of delivering just an engine, we'll deliver you a propulsion module, or instead of just a propulsion module, we'll deliver an entire rocket. And that's a big shift for the company, but it's very exciting because it's going up to become a tier 1 company that actually has its name up front and center when these interesting things take place.
Wow. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share or add today?
No, I just wanted to give great thanks to the people who set up this conference. A very exciting event. It was overlapping at the same time at the National Space Symposium conference. But it's interesting. I was talking about that earlier to somebody at the conference, saying, like, well, how do you decide to go here or there? And it's interesting because it's a reflection of this duality in the industry. You have traditional established and NewSpace, which is right on the bleeding edge. And I told them, like, if you wanted to know what's going on right now in the industry, you'll go to the National Space Symposium, which is sort of a traditional meeting ground of all the big players. But if you wanted to know what's happening next, then you come to Space Access. Because here's where all the new ideas are being incubated and bounce around, and there's a great creative energy in this place, which is really an amazing thing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again very much for joining us today.
Thank you.